All right, Sean, how's it going, man?
Good. A
Happy
little
New
out of
Year.
breath. Happy New Year.
Yeah, you were you hopped onto the podcast from putting down your firearm. Do you want to give an excuse for breathing so heavily?
Well, part of it is I actually am going to get a COVID test in a few hours. I've been sick since Saturday
Mm,
and couldn't get one yesterday because they're all booked up for obvious reasons. End of the holiday, everybody going back to work or whatever.
yeah,
Uh, so I have one booked for a few hours from now.
you
So I
just
don't know.
congested. Is that why you're going in?
It's that in my head, like a crazy headache, not a
Mm,
normal headache,
yeah,
which I hear is one of the things. It's probably
yeah,
the Omicron, not Megatron, but the Omicron.
yeah, totally. I actually, when I got COVID a while ago, and that's all it was for me. Actually, was a headache, and I felt a little achy. No congestion, no fever, no nothing. That's all.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
but
honestly, I hope it is. And then I'm over it. I just ran up my hill back to the firearm part,
yeah,
chasing
yeah,
coyotes. I had a couple coyotes almost nab our pug this morning.
yeah.
So,
So
that
Sean's
was,
out there protecting. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. We have a big German Shepherd and a little pug, and the pug almost got taken. That man, those little bastards, they're so crazy. They're so smart, and I'm watching it happen. My stupid pug thinks he's the alpha, right? He's the male. My shepherd's the female.
yeah,
And so he thinks because he can punk her that like other big dogs are no problem either.
yeah. That's funny.
So it's not smart, but it made for a hectic morning. Had to go, shoot a couple coyotes and run around with who knows what sickness. So
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
little out of breath, little whatever, but ready to
Yeah,
roll.
and
Let's
and
do it.
and guys, my apologies. After I hit record, I'm heading back home because I actually got sick apparently in my throat and I'm sniffling. So my apologies if that's annoying throughout this. Probably I shouldn't even brought it up. Now everyone will be paying attention to me sniffling.
I know the both
Um,
of us sniffle
yeah.
fest
So,
now.
but it is what it is. We knew we had to record, otherwise Ron's going to get a little pissy. So, and we don't want to offend him. He's a real sensitive type. So, hey Sean, have you seen Hamilton?
I love it. Yeah, I have.
Yeah,
Great.
I watched it last night. I went to the play, right, to the theater, and saw it in person.
So
Man,
good. Way better than
man,
watching the on TV for sure.
yeah. Well, I didn't watch it on TV, so I was I didn't ruin it for myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But man, such a great play. I
It's
actually,
inexplainable, right?
yeah, it was so good. It was so good. I'll be honest. What I was telling my wife afterwards on the way home, um, I'm so sensitive, right, to like political correctness, right? So, like, like in the first 5 minutes, I'm like, oh, hold on, are we doing this whole like this? Is this like political bullshit, right? Where we're gonna pretend like all the white guys are black guys and black guys are white guys, and you know what I mean? Like this is has, and no, it wasn't actually. It was just the best actor playing the best part.
Yeah.
Does it make sense? And I was like, that was actually super cool. Like I loved it. Like
They
the
nailed it.
the guy who played George Washington was stellar, right? Like I really enjoyed his character. I love the character of um of the King of England,
Oh.
and the role that he played in the thing.
So
It was super, I don't know. It was great. So, I mean, if
it is
anyone has a,
inexplainable.
yeah, I mean, those are tickets, they're very hard tickets to get, but if anyone's on the fence of seeing that play, it was awesome. It was
You
really
know what
great.
it does too, in my opinion, anyways, and I didn't really have the same thought that you had, but what it did for me is kind of what I talk a lot about it anyways on a regular basis, kind of with the men in my circle and other people that I know that, I hope we get to the point. I think we talked about it on the last podcast. I hope we get to the point where, we don't look at each other as like I have my Asian friends and my black friends, my Hispanic
Yeah.
friends, my white
Yeah.
friends that they're just my friends, right? And that play, I think nailed that, where you're not thinking of the characters as it was like this white guy or this guy or whatever. It was just these
Yeah.
powerful men,
Yeah.
right?
And I'm assuming it's probably different for different companies, right? So the
Yeah.
company that I watched in Salt Lake, probably had a different variation of actors that's probably different than what was on Broadway,
Probably.
in New York 5 years ago or whatever. So I like, it was funny, like, for instance, like Hamilton's son's black, right? And Hamilton was played by a white guy, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And I'm like, I don't know. I thought it was awesome, like really refreshing. It was great. So, but
Yeah.
anyhow, I don't know. It's on the head because I was like, man, it was such a good play. So, all right. So we're fielding questions today. We'll get right into these from the Iron Council. To learn more about the Iron Council, you can go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. It's currently closed. And so if you want to get on the waiting list or to get notified when we open the IC back up for enrollment, feel free to go to that website, sign up. So then that way you can be properly notified, as well as probably following Mr. Mickler on his socials is probably the other great avenue to stay kind of up to date when we open enrollment again. You can follow him at Ryan Mickler. That's Michler. What else? Yeah, I guess we'll dive right into these questions. And some of these questions, obviously, we already know where it's going because it's for us. We're recording this on the 3rd, so the new year just started. It's the first Monday of the new year, and our first question's by Bobby Caddy. He says, we don't hear about your battle plans a lot. What's one big thing that both of you are going to do this year? Kip Sorensen and Sean.
Hey, you know what? Why don't you mention the link to the battle planner too?
Yeah,
To the
that's a
app.
good point. Yeah, while you think about it, way to just give yourself some time to think through that, Sean.
Yeah, I actually have it. My battle plan's here.
Yeah,
So
so so we have a free program online that is actually available to you, and you can sign up, and it's 30 days to battle ready. And really what this is a guided process via email of getting a battle plan in place. And in the Iron Council, the tooling that we use to set our objectives, our tactics, and our goals on a quarterly basis is called a battle plan. So if you want to join us without necessarily being part of the Iron Council, go to orderofman.com/battle ready. And you can sign up for the Battle Ready program. We also have a mobile app that you can purchase for tracking of your goals. And that URL is 12weekbattleplanner.com, 12weekbattleplanner.com. All right. Did I give you enough time, Sean?
yeah, no,
Yeah.
like I said, it was here.
Okay.
But I think it's important that these guys have the resource and know where to go to get it and have it.
Totally agree.
One big thing, well, in my plan, I don't know how he wants us to share it.
Well, he was kind of like, what's one big thing you're looking for this year? So I don't know I mean, feel free to go over your battle plan specifically, but I was just thinking about like, what's one big thing that's on the radar? You know what I mean?
One big thing for me, we have our new business. It's called Happy and Strong, and it's building it and getting ready for the launch of my wife's book. And so we have to develop and build workshops, materials, online classes, communication with key markets, all the parts of launching it. And
so launching that business, getting it running, workshop scheduled, it running is kind of the objective, kind of the goal that you're looking at.
Yeah. I mean, we have to produce online classes. We have to produce materials, physical materials. Her book launches in May. So all of that's got to be ready to roll by then. Yeah.
Copy. So Bobby, I'm going to actually be completely transparent here. So it'd be really great for me to hop on here and like, I have it all ironed out. But I'm a little bit in a slump over the last week for whatever reason. And I think I do this on my birthday. Usually I get kind of like in this deep retrospective mood, and I start like, probably beating myself up more than inspiring myself. And I'm kind of like, I don't know, I kind of get in a slump. And so I'm actually in one of those little slumps. As I've looked over this past year, I've felt good about the past year. But as I look into next year, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit like, I don't know, lacking a little inspiration. So I've been struggling a little bit, and I ended up getting sick a couple of days ago. And so now I'm kind of like, but here's some objectives or goals that I wrote down when I was brainstorming last week, and most of these will probably happen. In fact, I feel pretty confident about it, but maybe this rapid fire, just sharing might give you some ideas. So, so I want to run another relay. I want to do Lotoja, which is a 200-mile bike ride from Logan to Jackson, Wyoming. I want to increase muscle mass by another 10 pounds by the end of the year, double my savings of what it is currently today. What else? I have an idea around a business venture that I wanted to start this coming year. And then this is a soft one because I know this is on my wife's radar. She wants to do a half Ironman, and so possibly do a half Ironman with her. So those are the big bucket items that I haven't worked back into saying, hey, I'm going to accomplish these in what quarter quite yet. But I'll be honest, when I read these two, I'm not inspired, and there's a little bit of self-evaluation where I feel like I've been playing small a little too much. And so thus my reason for kind of being a little bit in a slump. So
yeah, I think that's fine though. And it's that's why it's a plan. And that's why it's, I think you're there in process further ahead than more guys. And I think it's more important to be doing what you're doing than to say, I'm going to do this and not even write it down, just say you're going to do it. And that we know only lasts for a week or two. Right.
Yeah.
Where if you're actually introspective, think about it, think for the year. Like I just rattled off the one I have for the quarter. Right. But I also have a list like you do. I want to do this. I want to accomplish this. This is going to be, and then I broke it down. Okay. We have these goals for the year. Which quarter do I think I'm going to do those in? And then you break it down further from there. And, you know, it's a 200-mile bike ride's no joke. It's a lot of training and a lot of,
and I did a relay of that this year, so I ended up riding 90 miles, and my body broke after my first leg. Like it was like I was having problems. Yeah, it was really weird. Yeah, my nutrition was not right, but anyhow, there you go. Hopefully, Bobby, I don't know if that helps, but get after it. All right, Tyson Yonkers. Oh my goodness. Yonkers. Tyson. All right. I caught myself not quick enough though. Going with this month's theme. What is your best advice for building confidence in sharing what you know? There is a noticeable tendency of holding back from saying something because you are not an expert at it, or because you second guess yourself. It's a really good question.
Really good. The first thing that comes to mind, I think, is you got to know what you're talking about. You had to have either been proficient or found success in something. I think it makes it easier for you to share. Where I think what holds us back is not being confident in knowing what we're talking about. And so we stop ourselves. Actually, the book that we're reading in the IC this month has to do with that. Shoot, I have my notes here from that too. From that book, and in there, oh my gosh, I'm spacing on the name of the book now.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can pull it up.
It's in my phone. That I don't know where that is.
Mine just arrives today, so I haven't started reading it yet.
I've been listening to it and kind of taking notes with it. I just loaded it on Audible. Here it is. The Confidence Gap.
Yeah.
By Russ Harris. And in there, he says, let me find it here, that the confidence cycle is 1, practice the skills, 2, apply them effectively, 3, assess the results, and 4, modify as needed. And what I like about this book is that he has you pause to have you contemplate what you're thinking while you're reading certain parts of the book. And as I read it, as I was reading, it was interesting because he said, you probably had thoughts like ... right? And he gives examples, and he said, if that's what you thought, that's normal. And most of those thoughts were defeating. My overwhelming thoughts were like, that's exactly what I do. Like I actually wrote down one of the things when he said pause and what are you thinking? I wrote down my mind saying, I've always done that. right? And so it's those are the thoughts that I had, but that's also 22 years of working on myself in that way, right?
Yeah.
And of getting uncomfortable, throwing myself into things. And then I wrote this down, said the actions of confidence come first, and then the feelings of confidence come later. And
Yeah.
so like that's why I like doing this, because it tends to be questions that I feel I'm good at, right? If it's leadership, business, finance, relationships, being the best husband I can, father, obviously I'm working on all of those things, public speaking, whatever it may be. I think I'm good at the combination of those things. And that's what most of the questions are. So I feel confident to be on here, just like
Yeah.
I'm sure you do. But if we were going to talk, if we were going to have a whole talk on jujitsu, you'd be totally confident where I'd be less, right? Because I'm like white
Yeah.
belt on the brink of blue, right? And so if I'm going to roll with you, I'm not going to advise you anything. You're just going to keep wrapping me up like a bow, right? So I'm not going to be giving you any advice. So I'm going to have no confidence in sharing anything about jujitsu with you. Where on the
Yeah.
other hand, as you're wrapping me up, you're going to be like, see what I'm doing here. See, this is how you get out of it. This is what's happening. Here's how I caught you here, right? And you're going to have plenty of confidence because you've done it thousands of times. And so it's the action of doing it that comes first, and then doing it consistently over the course of time. And I'll end with this thought. When I thought of, I've always done that. When I was reading through this, I thought of some of the different things, especially in my business, where I wasn't confident, but I did it anyways. And that was presenting and doing presentations. It took me a solid 5 or 6 years to not have anxiety, not shake, not sweat, not stutter, not stumble on my words, and figure out what I was going to say, even though it was the same presentation. So it's not like I was using my personality and making up presentations as I go. It was all boilerplate, just, real turnkey presentations. I just had to get good at presenting that same thing over and over again. It still took me 5 or 6 years to be proficient enough at it where I didn't stutter and sweat and all of these things. And it was inexplainable. It wasn't a confidence thing. My body just went into that mode for that amount of time. And I had to accept to myself that that was going to happen every time. And I'm talking about not presenting on Zoom, like face to face. You have to shake someone's hand when you're done. And every single time my hand would be frozen and sweaty, and I would just, it was embarrassing every time. So I had to accept that I was going to be embarrassed in
Yeah.
every handshake at the end of presentation, to the point where literally near the end of my presentation, I would start sitting on my hands to warm them up, to be ready to shake someone's hand when I was done. So I just had to accept it. And then finally it stopped.
Yeah.
But most people would quit the first time it was uncomfortable, or that first handshake that was embarrassing, or whatever. And so anything, when you tell people that it takes years, that's what stops them from getting confident in it, because they're going to quit somewhere between here and there. You see that in the IC, you see that in anything. Like, guys come on, they're excited, they're pumped, they're engaged, and then things get uncomfortable. We do a thing like we did last week where we break into smaller groups and guys have to come out of their comfort zone and actually talk, and then they're out. Right.
Yeah.
And maybe you never see them again because they just couldn't get past that comfort. But you can't just do it the first time. You have to do it into the 100th time, into the 1,000th time, into the years span of doing something. And then that's going to build your confidence. Then it's easy to talk about.
Totally. Yeah. I'm looking at Tyson's question here, and I'm just trying to relate, Tyson. Like I run into this all the time. We had this, I'm just being transparent here. Like authentic is the term that Ryan would use. We had this Cancun, gathering with a group of guys. And part of me was like, why am I sitting at this table? You know what I mean? Am I Ryan's plus one? Am I like his little bitch at the meeting? Like, you know what I mean? Do I have an opinion to share? Do I have something valuable to bring to this table? Am I here because I'm seen as like the the guy that'll actually just get the work done, you know what I mean? But not the visionary. Like there's all these imposter syndromes. There's these areas where we second guess ourselves. I would say people, especially us that might have low self-esteem, you're going to look for evidence of why you're not good enough constantly, even when you are the expert, And so I think there is a little bit of a mindset scenario here, and maybe this might help Tyson around at least a different way of looking at it. But your question specifically was building confidence in sharing what you know, right? So we're assuming that you know something. You may not have the reps in quite yet, and you might be running your own story about how you're not, quote unquote, the expert. So who are you to have an opinion? That's when you share what you know and you focus your mindset about what you know, not necessarily saying you're the expert. This is one of the most profound, and by the way, this is the most effective way to communicate anyway. So let me explain. And Sean, I laugh the fact that I didn't know you were LDS until the last time we recorded. So, but I'll use this analogy, at least in the church that I attend. And by the way, we get it wrong all the time. But when it's done correctly, it's highly effective. So the first Sunday of every month is fast and testimony meeting. That means everyone's fasting and you're sharing your testimony. When you share your testimony, you share what you know, or you share what has been made available to you. You don't preach, you share. And what's so great about that is I've taken that and I see it, and I take that into work and into life. Sean, there's a drastic difference between you and I having a conversation and me sharing what I know, right? If I share to you like, hey, Sean, man, like, I don't know, maybe you're asking for something, or you're like, I'm really struggling in this area. And instead of saying, hey, Sean, you know what you should do is this. Instead, if I said, well, you know what, I'm not 100% sure, Sean, but let me share what has worked for me. When this occurred, this happened, blah, blah, blah. And I learned this lesson and it really helped me. That's non-threatening. By default, human nature is whenever someone, quote unquote, preaches to you, you immediately start evaluating. Is he right? Is he wrong? Is this applicable to me? You literally stop listening the minute someone starts preaching at you, telling you what you should or should not do. But when Sean shares with me from a story perspective, like what's just worked for him, I actually don't run my story about whether he's right or wrong. I just listen. And the reason why, I can't argue. How do you argue with Sean saying, hey, when this happened, I learned this lesson? That's not right or wrong. Sean's just sharing what worked for him. Does it make sense? And so it's a very, very powerful way to share what you know by not preaching, but sharing what's been made possible to you through an experience or lesson that you've learned.
You know what, as you say that too, I had the thought when you mentioned being with that group of guys, I see the mistake happen all the time with guys that are, I guess you could say, fake it till you make it, or they have this imposter syndrome, or I don't even know why guys do it, where they start talking like they know something that they don't. And it's always obvious. It's always totally obvious. And you're like, yeah, man, this dude is such a fake, like it's so obviously fake, right?
And it's just like any other lie. You convince yourself first, everyone else knows.
Yeah. And then the alternative to that is, instead of faking it, just ask questions. Accept that these guys or these people you're around know more about something than you do, and be willing to ask so that you can be better, so you can get to their level. And I actually thought of, I was on a surf trip in the Maldives, and I've been surfing since I was 12. So I've been surfing for 32 years, and I'm still not that great, not compared to some friends I have. But one of my friends I was with is a pro surfer. And when I was with him, I asked questions. And so I could have been like, oh, I've been surfing. I'm good. I'm having fun. But I still I knew there's an edge I could get by being around and taking, his knowledge. And so I asked questions. And it was funny because he looked at me, and the answer was almost obvious, but it was great because he was so willing and even excited to share. He's like, explaining it like I was literally like a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Like he's like, this part of the wave, if you get here, right, this is Where's it break? And he was literally explaining it to me like I was a little kid. And I was so grateful that he did that, where most guys are unwilling to do that because they don't want to feel like a little kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Even in that example, they'll stop listening. Like, yeah, I got you. And then they'll blow it off. Yeah.
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 And it was so helpful to me, and it improved my trip. I got better waves. I got barreled more.
Totally.
There was all these things that happened to my advantage because I was willing to be humble and ask and learn from someone who knew more than I did.
Yeah. You know what, Sean, you bring up a really good point. And we're totally running with Tyson's question here, but maybe another thought that is not Tyson's question, but is a valuable thought process nonetheless. And I'm reminded of it based upon what you said. Seldom do we ever hire. How's this? I don't hire employees because they're experts in something. I actually hire them because of the kind of person they are, because of their character. Period.
Yes.
We can learn things, right? And so I think about any strong relationship. Like if you know people in your life, and I'm sure, Sean, you've had these people where you like, I trust this person. They will kill it. They will find the desired outcome. They'll make sure it's done correctly. Like they're the reliable employee that you're like, I love these employees, right? And for the most part, that's my entire team. They, believe it or not, sometimes listen to this podcast. So I got to be careful what I say on here. So, but nonetheless, they're stellar from that perspective. If they come to the table arrogant and like, I already know that, then there's zero growth.
Big red flag.
Big red flag. And there's zero growth. So, and what's funny is we fake it thinking, oh, well, I need to show up like this expert so I can rub shoulders with this group. No, you need to show up genuine and authentic so that group loves you, right? We all know people will level up, right? We all know we can learn things. That's not really, once again, I don't hire because they're an expert. I hire because who they are. And part of who they are is humble enough and eager enough to learn and to grow. That's why we hire them. We hire them for their potential, not their expertise in the moment. And yeah, that's it. So it's okay not to be the expert. In fact, sometimes it's highly refreshing. In fact, as weird as it may sound, like I've been thinking about, don't get me wrong, I'm not stopped doing jujitsu, but I've thought about doing other forms of martial arts so I could be the green guy again. So I could go in and go, I know nothing, and just be a sponge. There's a level of like refreshingness that comes with, I don't know, and I'm here just to learn. And to be into that state of mind is actually really, really like enjoyable. So anyhow, I think we've beaten it up. Anything else you'd add before we move on?
No, spot on.
Okay. All right. Mike Denman, what do you do to address an inner rage that you just can't seem to get control of? You're laughing, but this is like a legit question.
This is a totally legit question, but
Mike, do not take offense to the fact that Sean just laughed at your question. In fact, Mike just get pissed off at you, Sean, and like,
I know, I just sparked his
go
inner
AWOL
rage.
on you.
I wasn't laughing at the question. I was laughing at when that happens to me.
It sure seemed like you're laughing at the question. You know what, Mike? I'll send you Sean's address and you guys can address it.
But I was honestly laughing because I thought that the time that it happens to me, really the only time it happens to me is with my kids, if I'm being totally honest. Yeah. Talking about transparency. I grew up in a household where, man, I got some beatings as a kid, right? Like I got some whoopings. And from my grandma, from my mom. It was funny, it was always women too. My dad never once touched me when I was a kid, you know? And maybe it was because I was only with him every other weekend. I don't know, right? But he never touched me.
Let me ask you this. When you have your rage, before you move on to the question, I want to ask this, why it's fresh in your mind. You mentioned you got whoopings when you're a kid. When you lose your temper, are you mirroring your mom or your grandma in that moment?
Absolutely. Like
it's almost freaky.
Exactly
right?
What I was going to say.
Okay. Yeah.
And I I especially caught myself. My mom passed this last year and she was sick with cancer, you know, for a couple years, just suffering. but I had a lot of great conversations with her. And as I spoke to her, as I had more of these conversations with her, she told me how when she was a kid, her parents used to fight. And like, I know she got some beatings from my grandma and stuff.
Yeah.
And she told me about fights that they had when they were a kid, when she was a kid. And she never told me this before. I never knew this about them until now. And then I started realizing the way I was reacting with my kids. Now, I never once have like hit my kids the way I got hit when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I find myself jumping into my automatic reaction is to do what happened to me.
Yeah.
And
It's the natural tendency that shows up.
Really
Yeah.
got to stop myself and like rein myself in. And so I literally will find myself like about to lunge at one of my kids and then stop myself and clench my fists and just, and I've done that a bunch of times with my kids. And I don't know if it's scary to them or what it is. You can kind of see it on their face. And then I have to have a conversation with them like, look, what you just said was totally inappropriate. I'm sorry, I'm getting mad. And I've learned to talk through it with them and let them understand how I'm feeling, how, what they said was inappropriate, and turn it into a conversation instead of just, physical consequence. And so for me, it's that kind of clenching my fist, so that there's a physical aspect to it for myself that I can feel, where I tighten up, and then breathing. And then my thought process has to go immediately to, I have to break this cycle. My kids have to learn something different from me so that when they have kids,
have this built in when they
their
become
initial
adults.
reaction, isn't to fly off the handle like I used to get from my mom and grandma. Yeah.
Totally. Mike, I don't know, maybe I'm in a weird mood. If I'm like discriminating myself on the podcast today. So I'll share a story, Mike, and I think it's applicable. So my two boys, I recently got divorced. My boys were 1 and 3. It was my first summer, full-time summer with them. And as anyone knows, daycare doesn't really work very well for a full-time worker, right? Like I dropped these guys off at daycare after my working hours started, and I had to pick them up before my working hours were ended, right? Like it was never like a full day's work, right? And there's a little bit of just imagine, let me paint this picture. At this point, I'm still kind of a victim. My wife left me, quote unquote. My life was falling apart. I'm trying to work. I got all these extra debts because the court system just screws men over. Like money doesn't make sense, right? Like what I have to pay versus what I make it's impossible, right? Like I'm upside down. It was a really stressful time.
It's an easy place to be angry.
Yeah. And what's funny about it is I didn't even take advantage of the fact that I had my boys full time. Instead, I was completely focused on how poor my circumstance was and how unfortunate it was. And I remember what would end up happening is I would work from home. I'd go to work. I'd pick up my kids. I'd come home and I'd still try to work, right? Because I had to get my work done. And so I'd multitask, quote unquote, multitask. And I would try to get work done while my kids are at the house with me playing. And I remember, and this is probably what I shouldn't share, but I'll do it anyway. I remember one point I was just losing my shit. And they're being playful. They're just playing. They're like being goofy, but in my opinion, at the moment, loud and annoying, and I'm stressed out. And I remember I grabbed my son and I lift him up and I pin him against the wall. And I told him to shut up. And I'm like, just shut up. Like, I can't handle it. Right. And I remember putting him down and I saw the fear in his face. And I was just like, you dipshit. Right. Like, why? Because he's having fun? Because he wants to play? Because he's harassing me? And ironically, I could have replied to that internal thought process, like, yeah, work's more important, but is it? No, it's not. And that's actually when I finally learned that you can't multitask with children, that I have to be fully present in whatever it is that I'm doing. And so for the first time in my life, I'd pick them up and I would literally have the thought process of like, man, I have so much work to do. Like I would evaluate, right, those things that are like stressing me out. And then I would say in my mind, fuck it. And then I'd go play Legos. And I would just throw it away. Like recklessly. I felt reckless. I should get this done. I should do these things. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm having fun with my kids. And I would do that until they go to bed. And then I'd get stressed out. And then I'd just work late after they go to bed. But I had to make that separation. I could not deal with work. I could not deal with things while being with my children. It was impossible. And so, Mike, I would suggest is inner rage is sometimes when we don't give ourselves the gaps, when we're trying to be concerned about one thing while doing something else, and it stretches us. And even today, like I still have to watch this, right? And I still have to like go, oh, wait a second. Why am I trying to do this and be with my kids? Why am I trying to do this and do this other thing? Like, no, I need to have gaps and margins in what I'm doing so I can be present in the moment. And that has been like a huge thing for me. And then the only last advice I would have, and I've had to do this in the past, and this is actually on my list of considering doing again, is I have my kind of like my mission, right? Like my ethos or whatever. And I used to read it before going into the house at the end of work. And so I could be intentional, like literally intentional. Because think about it. Imagine you just walked in the house from work and you weren't intentional, just kind of mopey, right? Versus if you chose to open the door excited to see your kids, like outwardly excited. Oh my gosh, how was your day? Like, and you had good energy, how much that would mean to your children over a span of a year. It'd be massive. Because guess what that feels like? Dad's excited to see me. Dad loves me, right? Dad appreciates me. It literally would mean that for your children. And it's as simple as being intentional in regards to how I say hello when I come home. And sometimes a review of your mission of what you're kind of focused on before going in the house might be kind of the level setting that you might need to be able to do to kind of get your emotions in check before going in the house. Man, I one last thing. Inner rage is what? It's an interpretation of something, right? So I would get present to that. I mean, I don't need to like psychoanalyze here, but like most of us, whatever we have rage over is not intended at the current circumstance. So like Sean, you're using the example of like, you get mad at your kids and all of a sudden you see a sense of probably your mom in you, right? Well, there's a really high probability that what your kids were doing didn't justify the reaction, but you're reacting literally as a 10-year-old of when something happened to you, and you're projecting that on your children, right? Mm-hmm. And so much of what really makes us angry is not warranted in the moment, and it's actually something that we've carried on from our pasts into our present. And one of the best ways to get that in check is to understand where that's coming from. Believe it or not, I have a thing about people eating loud. I know this sounds super crazy. Yeah, I'm actually quite psycho, but it's a thing I got from as a child. I can't stand it. Like it makes me angry, right? So if my kid's sitting all eating with his mouth open, I'm just like, I about lose my shit. So where did that come from? It came from my childhood, right? But realize where those things come from. So then that way you can course correct and realize that the emotions that you're feeling aren't the emotions of a 35-year-old, or Mike, I don't know how old you are. You're probably 21. You're a young buck, but it's not coming from the perspective of a 20-year-old. It's probably coming from the perspective of a 10-year-old and something that has occurred to you in your past.
Yeah. And sometimes you just have to forget. I think you nailed it when you said most of it comes from your past, and that you most of the time probably have to forgive someone or something that happened to you in your life, and kind of let go of it.
Yeah.
Because that's what you attach yourself to when that anger arises. Most of the time, I'm not saying that's always the case, but maybe that's part of it too, is that you really just need to forgive and move on from whatever, deep down is creating that anger for you.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Man, we're kind of rambling a little long on these. Sorry, guys. All right. Luke Watts. In recent weeks, I've spent time renewing my vision. This involves some time exploring values, affirming goals, and letting go of a couple of things as new priorities have surfaced due to my experience with COVID-related politics and actions here in Australia. Tough place to be. Much of this time was working quietly by myself. I want to renew the vision my wife and I have for ourselves and fully. How do you share and pursue your own vision and support your wives to do the same as part of your marriage? Also, how do you maintain focus as a couple? Reminders around the house, etc. Reminders around the house, family mission statement. What do you have found that works for you?
This is something my wife and I have gotten really good at over 20 years of marriage. And that's number one, we always know each other's goals. We always know each other's focus, our priorities, the things we're excited about, what we want to improve in, because we share with each other constantly. We also
it sounds like you guys are working together on stuff, right? Like your wife's, you mentioned earlier, like your wife has this book and you're like, oh, we need to do this stuff. Like, it sounds like you're an active participant in her said goal, right?
Yeah, we're actively engaged in each other's lives. And it's so there is no, I mean, her goals are my goals, but then I also have my own plan. And so one thing we started doing probably in the last, I don't know, 8 or 9 years is when we're planning, and we don't do it once a year, we do it like once a quarter, probably on average. And we make our own plans, our goals, whatever they are for our business, for just personally, things like that. And then we look at them together. And it's amazing how many times they line up. But because we communicate so often, we're almost always on the same page, where a lot of our goals are similar or even the exact same. And so that lines up. But then we also get to see what's important to each other personally that we don't have as the same goals. And so the fact that we even just see that on a fairly consistent basis makes a big difference. And then as far as our being on the same page and planning goes, we have weekly family nights. On Sunday nights, we do it in our house where we line up our week. And so we're looking at, okay, we have this happening, and that includes us, our kids, all the things that they have, whether it's sports or activities at school or whatever. Put in all the non-negotiables. Okay, you have this meeting that you're going to do. You have this Zoom you're going to do. You have these appointments. We both have it in each other's calendars. So there's no guesswork. And then our kids understand that they're part of this too. When it was just my wife and I, it was easier because there was just two of us. Then as kids came in, then we had to involve them when they were old enough of, okay, you have this, and this, speak now, because if you don't tell us about it and it's not in our calendar, that's no longer a non-negotiable. So if it comes up last minute because of your lack of planning, or you're
not getting a ride. You're
not getting a ride. You're not, you might miss the whole thing. And so it's not just my wife and I, but all of us are in tune on a weekly basis. And it just makes all of us more efficient, more effective. But the biggest thing is that we're constantly aligned in our parenting and our goals and our support of each other. All of that comes with just the consistency of us knowing what's important to each other and then supporting each other in that.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. I have nothing to add. I mean, I think just everything that you just said, right? Involve your spouse. And sometimes maybe you don't have as strong as alignment, maybe your wife's like, you're part of the Iron Council. That's weird. Vision. Are you cuckoo in the brain? Like, I'm not interested. Then you write up your own vision and you still share it with her. Right. So she's aware. Don't fall into the trap of covert contracts. Like, oh, I had this plan for us to be a certain way. And you're not communicating that to her. So So even if you're having to run solo and then properly communicate what's happening and kind of what your goals are. And by the way, if you want to just like a little tip, one of the best ways to get your spouse on board, share in a way that it's inspiring. Like actually share like what kind of man you're going to show up as and why you're doing this and why it's important, and make sure that they're part of your plan. And let her make that decision if she wants to do the same thing in the future. But overly communicate, right?
And be excited and stay excited about it.
Yeah, totally. And that builds in some accountability by nature just by sharing that with her. So, all right, Justin Jelsma, what are you investing in 2022? Any new investments, any continued investments, any advice on creating more streams of income for oneself and family? Thank you.
With investments, the biggest investment I'll always make is in myself, just getting better in business, creating business, growing my business, whether it's recruiting new guys, training, coming up with training protocols, whatever it is, just growth of business is where I invest most of my time and money and efforts. And then, other investments just come with that. I mean, foundationally, I save and invest more of my money than I spend. So those are always multiple things, but I hate getting into specifics because my situation is different than his. Right.
Yeah.
But as far as the multiple streams go, I think you have to figure that out through process on your own. I always go to cash flow quadrant with this by Robert Kiyosaki. First, you have to know who you are as far as what quadrant you are most comfortable in. So, or that gets you the most excited, or that you're the most proficient in, or that you want to be in. So some people literally just want to be employees their whole life. Okay, well, if that's the case, then extra income for you means doing something part-time. Sometimes it's as simple as that. Go get something part-time that earns you extra income. And a lot of times people are like, okay, I'll do that. They just needed someone to tell them, but they don't necessarily want to go on their own and get another part-time job. If you want to be self-employed, but you're an employee now, well, maybe you start something on the side, whether it's something you're good at and you start turning that into extra income on the side as a side hustle, you do that. If you want to be a business owner, maybe you start either creating systems or buying into systems, whether it's a franchise sort of thing. Maybe you start in like an MLM or something like that. I don't know. Right. But you have to figure that out, where you're engaged in some sort of a system that can start to build a business that's self-sustaining for you. And maybe you start that on the side, but you have to, through process, I think, figure out what that extra, but the bottom line is you have to do it, and you're going to have to put in the time to do it. You're going to have to drop some things that aren't useful to that don't serve that, and then put extra time and focus. And I would say a minimum, if you can't put in a minimum of 10 to 20 hours a week extra doing that thing to earn the extra income,
it's not gonna work out.
And then don't do it. Yeah,
that's good. Good advice. Well, and it's funny because so many people think like it's not work, right? It's like, no, it's still work. So if it needs to be successful, you got to work at it just like anything else, So yeah, be willing to invest in the time. For us, new investments, not really. Like I have some business, like I mentioned earlier, kind of a business idea that I kind of want to play on a little bit. COVID is kind of slowed me down in regards to that, but we're probably going to be building this year. So I share this really from the perspective of, I think there's times and seasons, you know what I mean? And so our season now is probably not to do anything other than get this house built. You know what I mean? And by the way, it has an investment to it, right? Like if you're smart as a business owner, right? Like you need to be having your business owner hat on. And luckily my wife and I are super aligned from that perspective. It's like, we're building a house off a lake, and it's like, okay, well, how does this work? Right. Well, no, there's going to be retreats there. You know what I mean? Like this is how this property is going to work. And this is how we're going, we can Airbnb it, but we're also planning on doing retreats at the lake as well. And so so this is an investment for us. And our hope is that it's going to kind of pay for itself as well over time. So, but that's kind of what our focus is, because we're building off cash. So I'm not willing to blow cash anywhere else other than that probably this year.
Yeah, I had one more thought too. Most of the time when guys ask this question, they're waiting for someone to give them some like hot tip, right? Oh, there's this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Or
I got
there's
the
this
tip. I
thing,
got it.
or whatever, right? But
Yeah.
that's the key is you just got to start investing, man. Like just do it, whether it's mutual funds, whether it's, put your money into a I don't know, like an indexed fund or something, an S&P 500 index fund or something, whatever it is, just start putting your money in something. Because the hardest part for most people is starting. And they're waiting for like the perfect investment or whatever before they start. Just start.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if you would have invested
there.
a little 5 years ago, you would have had at least something,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they do that with real estate. They do it with stocks. They do it with any quote unquote investment. The key is start.
Yeah. Copy. All right. Clinton Foss, Fauss. Is that how you'd pronounce that?
I would.
Foss. Clinton Foss. I have teenage nephews. How can I teach them valuable lessons that are difficult to consider until after you have life lessons? Example, learning to manage your finances before your finances manage you.
Just start teaching basic principles, whether you think they capture it or not. And kids are different. So your two nephews, I mean, you might teach them a financial thing and the older one might not care or get it. And the younger one might, and so I think the key is to not feel like they're too young to start teaching them basics or fundamentals. And I mean, that could be anything. It could be changing a tire, forget about financial things, just life lessons as they come up, also the fact that it's nephews, for me, it makes me think like he doesn't have any of his own kids yet. And I think it's important that you want to be able to teach them. I don't know if maybe they don't have a father figure in their life and that's why he's asking. I think it's also different with nephews that when you're around them, that you teach them as much as you can as a man and be that father figure in their life and show them what masculinity is and teach them those things. But also don't get so wrapped up in it. Realize like you're not their father, and like, that's something you want to do, but also don't let it distract, from everything else in your life as well. Just as a word of caution. I mean, but that's, it applies to your kids or anything else. But the fact that he said it's his nephew, that's the only thing I would worry, is that you get so worried about your nephews that you're trying to do it right all the time. I think it's just teach them what like kind of back to the first question, of teaching them what how you know it and understand it. And then you did your job.
Yeah, totally. Well, and a good resource, Clinton, is I love this book, but it's Outward Mindset. And in that book, they talk about how often in our relationships, especially with our children, we have a tendency to like want to provide correction to them without an established relationship. And it's the complete opposite, right? You need to have a really strong, trusting relationship established with them first before you're ever going to be in a position for them to come to you for advice, right? So one good strategy, Clinton, is how good is your relationship with your nephews, and just make sure that you have a solid relationship with them. So then that way you are then in a position to actually provide some guidance and direction. You being their uncle's not enough, right? By default, right? You need to work on establishing a stronger relationship than just your title.
And the most important thing, and being an uncle is enough if you're an example worth following, right? And so I think the most important thing you can do is be that example worth following, be something that someone they can look up to. And that man, that'll go miles.
Yeah. All right. Thomas Daniels, what are the character qualities and virtues of a good follower, employee, and subordinate, and the same as a good leader? Character qualities and virtues.
Are they the same as a good leader, is what they're saying?
Yes. Are the character qualities and virtues of a good follower the same as a good leader?
Oh, absolutely. I was just reading a John Maxwell book right now, and John Maxwell, I think, is the premier voice on leadership. I mean, he's written like 80 something books, I think, on the topic, but this is the one I'm reading now, The Self-Aware Leader by John
Okay.
Maxwell. So it's one of his newer ones. And it right before he even starts the chapter is that before you can be a good leader, you need to be a good follower. And every book I've read by him, he says that. Right. So if you have the first and foremost voice on leadership in the world, in my opinion, saying that you need to be a good follower before you can be a good leader, in every one of his books he's written, it's probably saying something.
Yeah.
Right? You know, and so I don't have any more than that, except yes.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think that's good enough. All right, Sam Broadway. Besides time blocking or task stacking, do either of you have any specific strategies you use to increase your efficiencies while working? Time blocking and task stacking, anything else?
I mean, honestly, either of those methods, I don't know if I use them or not because I don't know what it's called. So I don't know if that's what I'm doing or not, but I can tell you that for me, the most important thing to make sure I'm the most efficient is catch myself not being efficient. So I have it even in my battle plan, ironically, for the quarter, that I catch myself not being productive. And so where is it in here? So catch myself not being productive and immediately take action into being more efficient and productive. So if I get off course, you know, I talked about our planning and kind of having our non-negotiables, and then each day I have a plan going into the day, and it doesn't always go exact, right? It's like sometimes things come up. The other day it was raining. My son wanted to go play in the rain, so I did that with him for an hour. And that took me off course. So I didn't stop myself in the middle of playing with him and be like, this is not productive. You know, I got to get back to work. I just made that one of the more important things. And then when I came in and took off all my wet clothes, then it was like, okay, now what do I need to do? Right? Where was I? What needs to get done? What's at the top of the priority list? And let's do it. And then if I got distracted later by whatever, a push notification came up on my phone and all of a sudden I find myself on Instagram, you know, I need to stop myself. Is this helping me? Is this serving the purpose I'm trying to do today? You know, on an hourly basis, I try and catch. I got this from Ed Milet years ago, you know, probably like, I don't know, 18, 19 years ago, of just trying to catch yourself in situations and then reevaluate hourly. Is what I'm doing right in this moment serving me? And so that's my tactic that I've used for a long, long time.
Something I used years ago. I actually track my week in 15-minute increments. Oh, wow. Every single day. I just did it for like 2 weeks so I could identify all my time wasters. So maybe something to consider, because I think, excuse me, if you do that, you'll realize like time's not the problem, right? Like we have a tendency to do that. Like, oh, I wish I had more time. No, you evaluate your time and you'll realize you actually have plenty of time to get what you need to get done. So that's been useful for me in the past. The other thing is prioritize and delegate. That's probably been really big for me. Is sometimes I'll latch on to something I think subconsciously because I want to do it, because it's a distraction and it seems more enjoyable, but it's not the thing I should be working on. So the only thing I'd add, Sam, is just prioritize and make sure that you're working on the correct priority items, you know. And I really like Stephen Covey's, you know, evaluation of priority that way. You know, his 4 quadrants, you know, urgent, important, not urgent and important, right? And just be clear on what you really should be working on and what could really not, what could be pushed off, that and probably should be, but you're attracted to it because it's fun or due to some other reason.
I'm really glad you said that, because that's probably what I'm best at as far as efficiency. I'd say the first 3 to 5 calls I make every single day are getting other people to do things for me.
Yeah.
Whether it's, and most of the time, obviously it's staff, but sometimes it's someone on the team that's better at something that I am or whatever that needs to get done. It's calling them and making sure that is getting done for the day. And then I'll follow up with them later to see if it, make sure it got done. But yeah, that's a huge part of it, is that delegation as well.
Yeah. Okay. Joe Mead, how do you gain a level of tolerance with coworkers when it's hard to see past laziness and a contempt of idle chit chat? Gaining tolerance with coworkers.
It's you. I'm assuming he wants to be a leader, right? It sounds like he wants to be in or is in a leadership position. And so what you have to realize, if you're in any leadership position, is it's the 80-20 rule, right? 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And so what that means is most of them are going to be uninspired, quote unquote, lazy. They're not going to be as hard of workers. They're, it's kind of how we're taught. It's our system, right? You're taught as a kid to be a good employee. You get to be a good employee, and they pay you just enough to not quit. And in return, you work just hard enough to not get fired. And so that's going to be the majority of the people. You're not going to get a lot of go-getters. And that's human nature. And then most of them are not going to be your top performers. And you just have to accept that about human nature, and focus on what they are good at and what their good qualities are. Still praise them for that. And in my business, I call it EPR, encourage, praise, and recognize. And so every time I have a conversation with somebody, regardless of how they perform, I make sure that I praise them authentically, right? And it has to be real. It has to be a real thing about them that I appreciate about them, or that I like about them, or that they're good at. And make sure I tell them that. But I don't have the expectation, maybe necessarily, that they're going to be one of my top performers. But if I could just get them to do that little bit more, then that's a win. And so I think not going in with these super high expectation that, and I'm also assuming that this guy's a high achiever, a high performer, in a leadership position. And so he expects everyone to be like him. That's not going to happen either. Right. And that's any business, right? Like McDonald's goes through 30,000 applications to get one manager. Right. And so how many frustrating employees do they go through to get one manager, right? One quality person who does a good enough job. That's any business. Majority of people aren't going to do it. They're not going to do it well. They're not going to stick with it. Again, look at the IC. There's like, Ryan's got 1,100 members now, whatever it is. But I guarantee there's been tens of thousands of guys who have signed up. Right. And so there's a small percentage that actually go past a few calls. That's just business, right? That's just the way it is. Now, do you wish and hope that all those men would change their lives and affect their homes and their communities with it? Yeah. But that keeps us small, though, sometimes, if we spend too much time getting upset about the people that aren't doing it instead of focusing on the ones that are. And then, so in saying that, know that's human nature, and then find the 20%ers and spend most of your time with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't help, Sean, but think too that sometimes when we're focusing on our coworkers, right, and their lack of work or whatever, there's a little bit of like comparison happening, right? A little bit of why am I busting ass and they're not pulling their weight or whatever? And I would just say, just make sure you're not doing that, right? Because that's toxic. Like, just realize that, hey, you're doing your job. Why? Because it's your job, right?
That happens in marriages too.
Yeah. And you're going to kill it. And it doesn't matter if they're pulling their weight or not, you're going to do your job. And so find honor in how you show up, regardless of your coworkers, even regardless of your spouse, and just make sure that you're in alignment with what you know and how you should show up at your job.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay. Eric Swanson. What can I do to find my purpose? I haven't found my story. When someone asks what I do, I can tell you my job, but not what I do. I've read the books, I've taken the tests, but I'm still not there. I'm not lost because of that. I'm not lost because that would mean I know I'm trying to get somewhere. Kind of an interesting question.
It's deep. It's like, what is he? Does it say what he does, by the way? Like what his job is?
No, unfortunately not. Yeah.
I mean, that's so, I think he is the majority of people in our country. I don't know about the rest of the world, but I think in the United States, the majority of people just feel like they're in the rat race. They're just
Yeah.
kind of going through the motions, just kind of, not being fulfilled in the work that they're doing, not feel like it's moving them towards any sort of vision that excites them, or it really fills that innate feeling that I think all of us have, that we're supposed to do something special with our lives.
Yeah.
And so I think first it's figuring out what you can do in that job to
Where you are
be
now.
fulfilled. Yeah, where you
Yeah.
are now, to be fulfilled, like find something to attach it to that's going to give you purpose. And then if you can't, it's time to start looking at other options. Beyond that, I don't know. It's such a deep question, right? As far as like, I don't know what vision I have, because I don't know if I'm lost, because I don't know where I'm headed anyways. That just, it means he's drifting. And that's what most people do. They drift.
Yeah.
So make a plan. It sounds like you're not even trying, if I'm being honest. It sounds like you're just drifting and okay with it. Now, maybe you're not okay because you're asking the question, but the way you ask the question tells me you're not trying.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's put more effort into figuring something else out, coming up with the vision for yourself, getting excited about something, finding a purpose, and whether it's right or not, at least pursue it so you can figure out if it's right or not. And then along that path, maybe you'll find the thing that grabs a hold of you and gives you that purpose.
Yeah. I think knowledge and purpose I'd put in the same category, right? And there's data or information that you know. There's information you don't know. So like stuff I know I don't know. I don't know how to do brain surgery, right? I know I don't know how to do that. And then there's the you don't know that you don't know it. And that's probably where your quote unquote purpose is. It's not even on the radar. You're not even aware of it. So how are you supposed to find it? And it goes back to what Sean said. You try stuff. And we take it, we experience, and we try something, and we pivot and we adjust. And Ryan is a perfect example of this, right? Is he started Order of Man because he started I shouldn't say stupid. He started a financial podcast. If he didn't try the financial one, he wouldn't even enjoy the medium of podcasting, which never would have even opened up the opportunity probably for him to start the Order of Man podcast. So it's very like, sometimes you don't know until you're on the path of trying something. So, and the other part of this is like, I know it's semantics, but language has meaning. So find my purpose. I would rephrase that, Eric, and create your purpose. Don't find it. It's not going to be in a book. You might spark ideas or whatever, but there's probably something you need to create. And you're not going to know until you start creating things and then going, nope, that's not it. Let me try something else or whatever. Right. And I can't help but think this is mindset, right? Like I don't know. And maybe it's because of Hamilton last night, right? One of the closing songs that I really loved about that was, it was about legacy, right? You don't determine what your legacy is.
That's so good.
And what was great about it is, I don't want to give anything away, but like I walked away last night going, children, fatherhood, ultimately what matters. Well, Eric, are you a father? Then you just found your purpose, right? Like I have to remind myself often the priority. And sometimes the priority is not accolades of man. It's not the honors of men. Sometimes actually the purpose is actually something as simple as being a great father and a great husband.
Yeah, nailed it. I think this question has to be coming from a younger single guy, right? This could be an issue if the dude's like 68, in his job, feeling hopefully he's been doing the same thing for 42 years, right? That could be an issue. But either way, he's got to make that decision, like you said. But then I think it's also important, most of the time when we use the word purpose or vision, we think it has to be this huge change the world thing. And for some people that's true, but they don't start with wanting to change the world. They start with wanting to change themselves and maybe they lead into being able to change the world through that process, but they might land at being a good husband and a good father and a good member of their community. And that was their purpose, and they did it well. And they were a good example, and they helped other people do the same within their circle of influence. There's plenty of purpose that's worthy purpose in that. It doesn't have to change the whole world. You know, it could just be your home, your family.
Yeah.
And that's enough.
And sometimes, like, what's the best purpose is one that you're called to because you want to serve. Now, so you look good, but you show up because you want to serve. And I can't, once again, Hamilton, one of my favorite books of all time is The Real George Washington. An amazing book if you want to read up on the history of George Washington. He had zero, like, I shouldn't say zero, but like his whole role as a founding father was out of service. And because his desire to serve put him in a position to ultimately serve in the most profound way. But it wasn't because he was seeking like some great honors.
Yeah, that's why he didn't want to be king, right?
Yeah, that's why he stepped down, which we imagine if he didn't, how much different things would be, right? So his intentions were pure, and they're from a place of service. And so maybe that's another area to look in, is like, where are you passionate enough that you're willing to serve?
That's a great point. It's easy to find purpose if you just start volunteering for things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. All right, Stephen in Peril. Do you recommend BJJ as a good cross training with boxing? I'm a relatively experienced boxer, but I'm not even sure I could recognize BJJ if I saw people doing it. That's funny.
I think it's good for anything. I was doing Kempo. I was brown belt in Kempo, then moved. So I was super far from the gym I was going to. It was hard to continue to go there. I couldn't find any Kempo gyms near me, found Jitsu-Do and started that. Didn't like it because it was more kicking base and less, well-rounded in my opinion for me.
Yeah.
And then fell into jujitsu because I wanted my kids to start. It's actually funny. What is it? Warrior Kid. By Jocko. I bought that book for my boys, and then got them into jujitsu, and then got my daughter in. Then I started doing it, and now it's been a couple of years. But once I started, I was like, holy smokes, where's this been my whole life? Right? Like everything I learned to get to brown belt in Kempo, I'm like, I'm so much more effective after 3 months in jujitsu. And so the difference is they're two totally different animals from boxing. I did boxing a little bit too, but they're night and day. But I think the aspects you'll gain from it is you're going to know what to do if you go to the ground, which if you're just a boxer, you're going to have no clue, and you're going to get wrecked if you come across somebody who knows what they're doing on the ground. And so I think it's essential that you add that to your entourage of understanding. What it will also do is, I don't know if it's a better workout or not than boxing, because boxing's super high cardio.
It's different.
It's very different, but it's also, you're not going to get the head trauma and the body trauma that you get with boxing. And so longevity will be on your side in jiu-jitsu that you don't get with boxing. So I'd be all for it. I mean, you're more the expert than I am, but just having a background in other martial arts and now jiu-jitsu being the only thing I want to do, I'd say do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on good cross training. What's that mean, right? Cross training.
Is he competing
to be better from a self-defense perspective? Does it mean just like, I want to do something that helps my boxing? You know what I mean? Like it's a supplement to boxing, or is it a supplement to self-defense? So I think it really depends. I mean, if you were looking for something to maybe like open the horizons of your boxing, then I would say Muay Thai, and doing some Muay Thai stand-up with your boxing would probably be like super you might throw in some accidental elbows because you might like be getting your Muay Thai and your boxing mixed up. But But I think stand up from a Muay Thai perspective would be awesome for a boxer, right? And it would be kind of a natural kind of transition a little bit. But if you're talking about self-defense, then yeah, I'd say, well, you need to address ground fighting and grappling if you're feeling pretty good around your stand-up. And so I would say jiu-jitsu is your best bet for the ground and the grappling side of things. So
well, look at MMA too. You look at the base now for MMA as far as the best fighters, and what all of them agree on is that you need to be good at boxing.
Yep.
You need to be good at wrestling. You need to be good at jujitsu. Like those are the three majors
totally
that they all agree on now.
Yeah. And the only thing I debate is like some guys may not go into boxing, but they'll be just at least Muay Thai wrestling and jiu-jitsu, right? But some form.
And that's the thing. A lot of them have a taekwondo or a kempo or, you know, whatever it is, background, a Muay Thai, a lot of Muay Thai. But they get taught and coached into more fundamental boxing. Even those guys with that background.
Yeah. Because they need to figure out how to counter and everything else. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Last question. Marcus Segura. Sorry, Marcus. On the topic of creating personal accountability, how do you ensure that over time you can measure accountability? For example, if I have a 12-week battle plan and I complete my daily objectives and weekly benchmarks, are there things I should look out for as a warning to ensure that I'm not just checking the boxes?
Yeah, I had this question come up a couple of times for me on the last battle team I was on, because I got 100% a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And I had some guys asking, like, does that mean your plan's too easy? Like, are you not pushing yourself? And it made me honestly evaluate it. And my answer was no, I'm just getting this stuff done because it's in front of me. But I think there's a difference of making a plan so you can check off the boxes so that it's easy, so that you can feel like you're accomplishing something, and actually getting it accomplished.
Yeah.
And so if you're checking the boxes and that, let's say it's fitness and you want to be a certain body fat percentage and certain weight, you can make that goal. And then there's daily things you have to do. And if you did your workout, you know, whatever was in your plan, you know, 30 minutes of workout, no matter what it is, just get that 30 minutes in, and you were able to check that. You had to do it to check it. And then at the end of the quarter, you dropped some, maybe you didn't hit your goal, right? Maybe your goal was 12% body fat, you know, 180 pounds, you got to 185 and 14%, but you started at 16, you know, and so you didn't hit the goal, but it got you closer. Then you're not just checking the boxes. If
it's working, it's not a box. If what you're doing is working, then who gives a shit if it's checking the boxes? It's working, right?
Yes. But if you're just, like we mentioned before, just going through the motions and kind of like last minute, okay, let me throw this together, and you're doing it poorly just to check off the box, then that's where we get ourselves in trouble, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, in the battle plan, we have these, I always call them milestones. I can't remember what we call them. Do we call them milestones?
The checkpoints?
Checkpoints. Yeah. I mean, that's the whole point of the checkpoints, right?
The 30-day checkpoint.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like, okay, I'm a month into doing X tactic for this objective. Is it working? No, it's not. Let me pivot. Now, if that's not quick enough, you could come up with checkpoints during the week, right? Like break it down even on a weekly basis. Like, yeah, okay, if I'm going to lose 10 pounds in 30 days, well, that means I should be losing roughly about 3 pounds every single week, right? 2 or 3 pounds. Well, are you? You know, and if the answer is no, then okay, what do you need to do to adjust, right? So how's this? The fact that you're thinking through this is exactly what you should be doing, right? Yes. You're being intentional, saying, hey, you know what? I just don't want to be checking the boxes, and I want to make sure that it's pushing forward. The question is, well, if it's pushing forward, then you're not just checking the boxes. If it's not progressing you forward, then obviously you are just hitting the boxes. So what do you need to adjust? And I would say most guys fell on the opposite of this, right? Where they'll go, well, Sean, if I do these 20 things part of the physical, I'm going to have way more success. And then in 3 weeks, they burn out. And then they're off the wagon and it's all falling apart. So
Good point. They start too
sometimes,
big.
yeah, sometimes being moderate is actually exactly what needs to happen. It's amazing. I mean, think of it this way. If you look at just America alone and what would change from a physical perspective for people's physical well-being if we all stopped drinking soda. That's it. No diet change, no nothing else, no workouts, no nothing. Just stop drinking soda. It'd be drastic. And sometimes we have a tendency, because we're high achievers, right? We'll come in and we'll go like, oh, I'm going to do that. Blah, blah, blah. Actually, maybe you should just stop drinking soda. Maybe that's all that needs to happen.
Yeah. That's nailed it, because most people think of some big goal, maybe you want to lose 50 pounds or whatever, like you said, and then they're just thinking of the working out. But it takes, realistically, if you want to drop 50 pounds and keep it down and become lean and all those things, you're going to have to start with bad habits. So maybe it's dropping soda. Then you're going to need to add supplements. Then you're going to need to work out. Then you're going to need to probably get a trainer. Then you're going to, right. And you're going to have to add things as you go. But if you jump in with I'm going to cut this out, I'm going to add these supplements, I'm going to get the trainer, I'm going to do all this, it's too much. So instead of doing that first quarter, you break it down into those bite-sized chunks. And I think that's what I got crap for, because that's what I was doing, but I was accomplishing all of it. And after a year went by, I had achieved that goal. But if I put all of that stuff into my first quarter to quote unquote push myself, I wouldn't have followed through. I wouldn't have done it. And I wouldn't have carried off. You need those little successes to prove to yourself that you're worthy of accomplishing that goal. If you make it too much too soon, you trick yourself. It kind of comes back to that confidence thing at the beginning of the call, right? You're going to decrease your confidence in yourself I'm not saying don't think big, right? But you need to back engineer it and spread out the tasks that need to get done to achieve that goal, so that you build up that confidence, that self-talk, become worthy of the things you want to accomplish, et cetera, et cetera.
Totally. Yeah. It's that, maybe we could paraphrase it it's the difference of creating a battle plan based on motivation versus discipline. Be careful that you're not just fired up. You know what I mean? You're like, yeah, versus like, are you fully committed to actually honoring your commitment and your word and doing those things every single day?
Yeah. It's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. All right, let's go ahead and wrap up. So, we mentioned a couple things, and I think we just focus on battle plans for the coming year. So to sign up for the Battle Ready, that's orderofman.com/battle ready. And that allows you to sign up, and it's free. So sign up and get that, since especially you guys listening that are waiting for an opening in the Iron Council. That's kind of one thing that you can do to be kind of focused. And by the way, even if you're like, hey, Kip, I'm joining the Iron Council once enrollment opens back up, so I'm not going to be worried about it, I would suggest get a Battle Ready, get your battle plan figured out through Battle Ready anyway, because that will even assist you as you join the Iron Council, because you'll be kind of aligned with us in regards to what the battle plans look like and kind of what's expected of you. For those that want to get that battle planning app on your iOS and or Android device, go to the numbers 12 weekbattleplanner.com to download and purchase that app. And then as always, you can follow Mr. Mickler on the Insta and Twitter at Ryan Mickler. What else? I think that's it.
You know what? I just had the thought as you were saying this, especially with the battle plan and it being closed right now. I've recommended a couple guys to the IC and told them to go to orderman.com, and they're like, oh, it's closed, I couldn't get on. What do I do in the meantime? And my advice was just start listening to the podcast on a regular basis. Read Sovereignty, get the book and read it, and do that until it opens up. If you stay engaged when it opens up, then you sign up and you get started. Don't just chalk it off as, oh, it's not open, well, I guess I can't do it. Stay engaged, start doing some things, and then jump in.
And connect with us on, on Facebook, right? Or other ways, right? And that's facebook.com/group/orderman as well. So Sean, thanks again, brother.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
As always, love the conversation.
All right, guys, stay tuned, stay connected with us, even on YouTube as well. And until Friday field notes, take action and become the men you were meant to be.